place. And congratulations also on being your grandparents.
Thank you very much.
She's a beautiful child.
Interesting time in the life, right?
It really is.
I want to spend most of our time on the lessons we will learn when we visit this place over the years and why you did what you did here. But I just want to ask you, sir, the investigation is ongoing. I don't want to get into the details, but just as the man who was Commander-in-Chief on 9/11, what went through your mind when you heard explosions at the finish line of the Boston Marathon?
Yeah. I was reminded that evil exists and that there are people in the world who are willing to kill innocent people to advance a cause. I don't know what this cause is, but we'll find out. During the same week, in a town close to us at Crawford, a plant exploded. And both incidents remind me of how fragile life can be for some. And both incidents made us weep, knowing that somebody was hurting a lot.
Let's focus on this place, and it's beautiful, and it's brand new. You're the librarian in the family. Are you the decider when it comes to this building?
Well, I was the chairman of the design committee.
Yes,
sure.
is the answer.
But it was really fun for me to work on it, since I am a librarian, and also I'm particularly interested in architecture. So we're very proud of the way it looks. It looks terrific.
It's an elegant building, just like the chairman of the design committee.
You're going to have all of the living presidents
you
here
bet.
For the dedication. What have you learned from the formers, your dad, President Clinton, President Carter, about how to be most effective in a post-presidency?
Well, you learn that life doesn't end after you're president. In other words, you're going 100 miles an hour, and in my case, we woke up in Crawford and I was going 0. And so the challenge is how to live life to its fullest. In my case, I've chosen to do so outside the limelight. On the other hand, I am confident that when this chapter of our life is finished, we will both be able to say that we've advanced the cause of peace and freedom and helped improve the human condition.
One of the things I think that is fascinating about the library is that you've created this exhibit called the Decision Points Theater.
Yeah.
Where any visitor can walk in and see some of the advice you got on the hard ones.
You bet.
And then make their own decisions based on what you saw at the time. I want to go to one of those, which is the Iraq decision, which you know is something people always debate when they talk about that word you don't like, legacy. People in that room will see what you saw at the time.
Right.
I want to ask you, sir, based on what you know now, do you wish that instead of the Rumsfeld doctrine, which was lean and mean, going with a lighter force, that you had maybe adopted what your dad did in the first Gulf War, the Powell Doctrine, and gone in with overwhelming force?
Oh, in my book, I pointed out that there are some, tactics that need to be revisited. On the other hand, the removal of Saddam Hussein was the right decision. America's more secure. The Iraqi people have a chance to live in a free society. The museum it does give people an opportunity to hear the different points of view that I got on these particular issues, the purpose of which is not to try to defend a policy, the purpose of which is to try to show people what it's like to be the president and how you make decisions. History will ultimately judge the decisions that were made for Iraq, and I'm just not going to be around to see the final verdict.
You're not going to be around. It's an interesting way to put it. You,
in other words, I'll be dead.
As First Lady and now as part of the Institute here, you focused on the empowerment of women. We saw it a lot in Afghanistan in the initial months after 9/11. What's your sense now when you look at what you can do and what the Institute can do? If you look at that region, whether it's Iraq we just talked about, still a big question mark. If you look around, look at Syria, look at Egypt. The whole region is in this incredibly volatile stage. And have the rights of women in some ways been set back because of all the changes, or at least held hostage to all the volatility?
Not necessarily, no. I think people really worldwide are looking at the rights of women and seeing how important women are to every society. When you look at countries where women's rights are marginalized and where half the population is left out, you usually see a failing country. That's what we saw in Afghanistan. I'm still worried about the women in Afghanistan as we draw down our numbers of troops.
What can you do about it? Is there so much uncertainty it's hard to get involved?
On the other hand, women have made great strides in Afghanistan.
Democracies take time to evolve. And Laura and I believe that women will help lead the democracy movements in these young democracies. And part of our afterlife will be to enable and empower women, and to remind our country through programs that we institute here that our involvement overseas is necessary to our national security.
I want to ask you, what will we learn from the theater and from all the memos that eventually will be made public about one of the toughest decisions of your presidency, which was right before Katrina, where you had to decide whether or not to send in the federal troops, and you had a big debate about whether to overrule the governor?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think you'll just learn about the dilemma of federal law related to natural disasters. I mean, natural disasters in our country have generally been left to the governors. And the role of the federal government is to be supportive. In this case, the natural disaster was so overwhelming and the infrastructure was so overwhelmed that I had a tough choice to make. And people will just learn the facts. See, that's all I care about. And that's why I wrote my book, which I'm sure you've assiduously studied. And well, thank you.
And you talk about the idea that you have a Southern governor, a woman governor, in a state with a large African-American population, a former governor yourself.
Yeah.
And people were telling you, Mr. President, maybe you need to declare an insurrection.
Insurrection, which would have been pretty difficult. Not pretty difficult, very difficult. Yeah, and so it just points out the dilemma.
You wish in hindsight you had done it?
No, not really. There's no telling how history would have recorded the situation had I declared insurrection. I can tell you that the decibel level would have risen even louder than it was. The point is that this helps Americans understand, one, what the decisions that I made during a massive storm, but also points out the dilemmas that presidents face. Not just me, but every president has got a series of conflicting advisors, and you just got to pick and make the best judgment call you can. And hopefully people will go to the Decision Points Theater and say, wow, I didn't understand that, or I now understand it better. And it's interesting to me, they say, of how a president